Okay, I'm hitting record and we are going to get started. I have everybody on mute right now. Just a reminder to stay on mute for the program unless you're the one speaking. I'm Chad Koulis, Executive Director of the Midway Chamber of Commerce. And, today was going to be part 3 of our Economic Development Summit. We were planning on doing our Economic Development Summit on April 15th, and it was going to be in person, and it was going to be for about 3 hours, 4 hours. And then the coronavirus hit and we had to adapt, and we changed our summit to a 5-part series on 5 consecutive Thursdays. Last Thursday at 8 a.m. we did our second part, and the topic was community. Little did we know that a few hours later our community would be greatly changed. And once again, we've adapted our programming so we can have programming most relevant for so many of these businesses that are now in a rebuild mode, and the Midway community is in recovery. And there's a lot of opportunities out there for people to help out. We've been trying to get them on our website. Please send them our way if you know of any. We are going to be helping out at the Midway Y next Tuesday for a food drive. If anybody wants to donate food, they can do so there. They can also sign up to volunteer and be somebody who's helping out at the food shelf at the Y. There's other opportunities for volunteering. There are different funds people can donate to. African Economic Development Solutions has a fund. There is the Midway United Fund by the District Councils, Hamlin Midway Coalition and Union Park District Council, otherwise called the Neighbors United Collaborative Fund. And there's also one that we are doing in partnership with St. Paul Chamber and with St. Paul Downtown Alliance, called either We Love St. Paul or We Love Midway. You can find information on all of those on our site. And this is just an important conversation for us to have today, talking about how you can rebuild and recover your business. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Alton. But a reminder, if you do have a question, you can put it in the chat, and we will hopefully have time for all the questions that we have. And also another reminder, put yourself on mute unless you're one of the panelists and you're speaking. Brian Alton, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you for letting me be part of this panel discussion today. You know, it's really interesting how the Midway Chamber is doing such a great job of being timely and relevant and responding to the needs in the community. So it's just great. I'm a partner in the law firm of McClay-Alton, PLLP. We're located on Grand Avenue in St. Paul. We've been here for over 30 years. And I primarily practice in the areas of business law, real estate, and estate planning. Our 4 panelists have been assembled by Chad to share their expertise with us for the areas in which they do their work. And the first one is Caleb Brunz. Caleb is the president and head coach of Paul Davis Restoration. It's located in Midway at I-94 in Vandalia. Caleb has 22 years of experience in leadership, management, and coaching in restoration and construction industry. He owns and leads the Minnesota office of Paul Davis, including Greater MSP in Duluth. Paul Davis Restoration has been providing COVID-19 disinfecting along with their normal catastrophe work for over the last several months. Caleb, if you would please further introduce yourself and tell us how you responded over the last several days and how your organization is able to help with the recovery.
Yeah, you already mentioned what we do, and frankly, what's really been difficult is this kind of work is what we do every day, but it's typically not started with such an emotional charge or such a cultural and social uncovering of a lot of work that still is needed to be done in our communities. And so this last week has been an emotional roller coaster ride. We were called in from one of our clients, Target, to board up the Midway Target last minute, and no one's ever dealt with this before. And my team and my staff, we had to balance being in harm's way and safety with providing, taking care of our clients in their greatest time of need. And we were first time I can imagine as a disaster catastrophe recovery company, having my team out there or anywhere being protected by riot police while we're boarding up a store and having to be told to leave because it's unsafe, and then please come back and then leave again, and then come back again over a course of 20 hours to get targets secured. So, and then to find my daughter going down to the peaceful protests and not telling me, a 17-year-old, and calling me frantic as the semi came through. She was on the other side of the bridge. So this has been a very emotional time for many of us in the community. And, that's a little bit about what we've been dealing with. And it breaks my heart. We've got a lot of work to do to recover, not just with our properties, but culturally and emotionally as a community.
Yeah, thank you, Caleb. That's great. The next panelist is Brian Hayes. Brian has worked as an independent insurance agent for 35 years. For the last 9 years, he has been a risk advisor with Western Insurance Agency, which is a division of the WA Group. As a risk advisor, his primary focus is to help business owners identify and manage the risks within their businesses. Brian, would you also introduce yourself and tell us how you and your organization have been able to do work for your customers and prospects during basically the COVID-19 and then over the past week or so too?
Muted, sorry about that. Again, I'm Brian Hayes. I want to say thank you for including me in the conversation. I've been with the Midway Chamber for a number of years, and as has our agency. As an ambassador, I've been involved with the organization for probably 5 years, and happy to be a part of it. We at Western Insurance have been kind of deeply involved in a lot of different things involving Corona and COVID. A lot of the information that we provided to our insureds was in hypothetical situations, and then it got jumped right into the deep end with unemployment issues, HR issues, having to deal with issues that they'd never faced before. As far as the most recent events that we've dealt with, again, a lot of these are hypothetical situations. We fielded phone calls from property owners to business owners, those that were tenants, those that had automobile theft, fires, break-ins. It's been quite interesting for us all. And really some of the most important things is just to remind people from ours and to take pictures, make good notes, keep receipts of everything they do. Pretty typical for any type of loss, but now you've got more people that are hypersensitive to exposures that they've never ever thought about in the past. So when we deal with the individuals, we're trying to walk them through scenarios, whether they are, again, business owners, building owners, or they're tenants in buildings, what different scenarios they might be. Each insurance company is a little bit different on how they respond to losses, and the policies are really the proof in the pudding. We'll go through the policies with our insureds as the loss occurs, and we like to help prepare them for dealing with adjusters. So anytime someone's got a loss, it's good to talk to the agent before they speak with the adjuster so they get a good feel for what they can expect in the claims process. We walk them through that so they have a comfort level on what they can prepare as far as notes, questions, and that's our role in the claims process is to jump in if there's a problem, but really to prepare our insureds for the conversations that they're going to have with adjusters. So, that's really what we've been up to so far in the process. We don't necessarily know where it's going to end, but we're helping all of our insureds through the process. So,
Brian, have the insurance adjusters been on the ground in the neighborhood?
Yeah, absolutely.
In the Midway?
They're jumping on it as fast as they can. They've brought in catastrophe teams to address all the different issues that they're faced with. So they want to get claims paid as soon as possible. It helps everybody. It helps the insurance companies to get it cleaned up, and it's good for their images to try to resolve issues quickly because everybody needs help right now.
And I heard your comment about call the insurance agent first and then have them help out in the initial reaction and then work with the adjuster after that.
And that's typically what we do. As an independent agent, we don't handle the claims. We have a claims department, but we don't do anything other than coach our insureds as they prepare to turn and visit with adjusters.
Great. That we have two panelists that are with the Minnesota Department of Commerce that Chad was able to get us to join the panel today. The first is Matt Vatter. Matt is the Assistant Commissioner of Enforcement at the department. He leads a team of professional civil and criminal investigators that investigate industry and consumer complaints in the areas of insurance, real estate appraisal, mortgage, investment, money transfer, and other areas regulated by the Department of Commerce. Matt joined the Department of Commerce in April of 2019 after he had been the Chief Operations Officer for a local veteran-owned cybersecurity company and a 30-plus year military career, finishing his career as the Director of Strategic Plans and Planning for the National Guard. And then also we have TJ Patton. TJ is the Audit Director for the Insurance Enforcement Team at the Department of Commerce, and he supervises a team of 9 investigators responsible for conducting investigations of alleged violations of the insurance laws and rules. So Matt and TJ, I'm going to leave it up to the two of you to how you want to take your introduction and tell us a little bit more about how your role fits in this time of recovery that we're going through.
Hey, thanks, Brian. TJ, if you don't mind, I'll just do a real quick overview here, and then I'll turn it over to TJ. He's the expert in our team, or for our team, in the insurance products that we help to oversee and regulate from an enforcement perspective, and making sure that laws are applied properly and rules are followed within that specific discipline, which we all know is pretty important during this time frame. The department is fairly diverse in what it is that we regulate. We have, in broad scope, we regulate the entirety of the insurance industry. We oversee and regulate financial institutions, primarily state and non-depository. We have an energy services division where we do energy provision regulation. And then the weights and measures team is also within the Department of Commerce. So you can see that there's a lot of areas that the department touches. It's important for us to be involved at all the aspects and be seen more as partners than as regulators. I think that's the biggest message that the commissioner would like to get out, is that we can help solve problems, not just come in afterwards to kind of be the heavy thumb of government. We really want to be a part of the discussion and how it is that we can use our regulatory oversight, our authorities, and our familiarity with the various market spaces that we have to be partners in the solution. We had some drastic changes, as everybody understands, as we shifted the way that we do business due to the COVID-19 emergency and pandemic response. One of the initial things that I talked about coming from my background as in emergency management with the National Guard was anticipating how it could possibly be worse. And I know I talked to my team about, okay, the COVID-19 piece is disrupting the way that we do business, but what if something else happens? What if when we come into storm season, we start to get compounding factors where we have something like COVID-19 that now helps or also influences how it is that we react into an emergency, and who thought something like this would happen. So there's a complex environment in which all of us have to operate, and having a body of experts that we can all reach out to, that we can talk with, that we can discuss, that we can share ideas, is really the best way for us to achieve the types of end states and solutions that we're looking for, that are best for everybody, not just the consumer, but also for business and for all of the different entities that work within their government and all the support that goes along with it. So TJ, why don't you kind of offer your perspectives?
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us be a part of this event. It gives us an opportunity to reach out and let people know what our agency does. Obviously, as Matt and all the other panelists have talked about, this is a trying time because we really do have compounding factors. I really want to take an opportunity to talk about some things that impacted insureds can do when they experience the things that Caleb talked about when boarding up the target, and Brian and others have talked about where vehicles have sustained fire damage or renters have had their apartments damaged, things like that. So before I start talking about a few things that every person that's thinking about filing an insurance claim should consider, I want to just let you know that our agency has a general number that anyone who has insurance questions can call and ask, and we can either provide answers or point you in the right direction to where you may be able to find answers. And that number is 651-539-1600. You can also go to any search engine on the internet and type in Minnesota Department of Commerce, file a complaint, and it'll prompt you to a whole list of things in which you can let us know that you think something is wrong. The first and most important thing, and Caleb provided a great example, is when he was talking about helping board up a local target where he would start his work and then need to leave for safety concerns and then come back. So the first thing is always going to be, is it safe to access the premises? And once it's safe to access the premises, one of the most important things you can do is start taking pictures and start making a list of inventory. Those things are going to become very important as you let your insurance company know that there has been damage to an insured premises, and that you'll need to eventually provide a list of what it is that was within the insured premises that was damaged. You'll also want to be very careful about what you throw away. Obviously, things that are perishable or are dangerous should certainly be removed from the premises. But for documentation purposes, make sure that the insurance company has an opportunity to inspect the damaged premises as much unchanged as possible. You also want to consider, if you haven't already, is there a police report that's been filed? Obviously, there's a lot of law enforcement folks that have been in the impacted areas, but if there's not a report specific to your insured premises, I think it's important to consider letting the police know that you'd like to file a report, and I think that will serve you well once an insurance claim is filed. And then the last thing, of course, is making sure that you promptly notify. You can notify, as Brian indicated, your insurance agent, who can refer you to the claims department of your insurance company, or you can contact the insurance company directly and start the claims process. As others have indicated, insurance companies are relatively adept at responding to catastrophes, and this pandemic and the social unrest has certainly provided some catastrophe-like responses from insurance companies, and so hopefully they'll be able to very quickly come out and help you with answering questions and also starting the claim process. With that, I'll hand it back to Brian.
Thanks, TJ. Have you noticed any increase in calls either related to COVID or the last events of the last week yet in your department?
So we certainly have received an increase in calls as a result of the pandemic. I think we're still very much in the early stages of people that have suffered some type of property damage starting to recover. And so we anticipate that we will, but I don't think that it's increased substantially yet.
Thanks. And then Matt, I also want to follow up with you and circle back with a comment you made about being partners in solutions. And we really appreciate the fact that the Department of Commerce has that enforcement function, which is very important, but also rather than just being reactive, to be proactive, and what the department can do to help consumers and businesses.
Sure. TJ mentioned the access into the department for, the communications team, Leah and Brian and their staff have done a great job of building the informational tools that folks can use to start the process and to understand the vocabulary to use when they talk with an insurance agent, because quite frankly, this is something that most people have never ever experienced, right? If you've been unfortunate enough to have damage done to a home or a business due to severe weather, tornado, or what have you, you're going to be a little bit more familiar with the process. But by and large, folks don't need this level of attention and understanding as it relates to responding to a disaster. So we've been trying to be proactive and engage with various elements across the state, put out informational products that allow people to understand how to begin the process. And then we're always available, as TJ had mentioned, via the telephone to give our experts a call. We've got folks that have been doing this job for 20 plus years. So there's not a whole lot that they haven't seen and not a whole lot they haven't encountered. They are very, very well versed in the laws that govern our industries, and not just from an insurance perspective, but also from a real estate perspective, from a mortgage origination, from appraisal management. We also oversee money transfer and all of those types of issues that are related to that. So we have this very, very deep and broad pool of knowledge that we can tap into to help people to talk through some of the things that might come up.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Chad, we've got some questions. Do you want to start with that?
Yes, we can start with those. I'll just mention here from John Young. He says, as I mentioned, that we're starting the We Love Midway Fund to help businesses in need. There's other funds out there as well. Can you please help guide us on what expenses are not covered by insurance for a fire or other damage claim? We're trying to target our funds to make the largest impact without duplication. And follow-up question to that, how long will it take for a business to know what is covered and what is not covered?
So I'll go in reverse order if that's okay. When it comes to coverage determinations under state law, insurance companies have 30 business days from the date of first notice of loss. Now, as with all clear answers in this world, there are some caveats to that, and depending on the number of different types of coverages which might be involved in a damaged property, or the scope of damage, the more damage that there is, the harder it is for everyone involved to assess the amount of damage. And so there are some fail safes for companies as long as they let you know that they've had certain challenges in the handling of a claim, but generally it should be within 30 business days. With respect to what's covered or not, that's a more difficult question that's going to be very much policy specific. But from our research on, for example, with respect to damaged businesses, the most common types of policies are going to be business owners or commercial property policies. And our research suggests that a super majority of those provide coverage for damage as a result of property damage as a result of riot or civil commotion. And so what is not covered is a more difficult question, but based on my research, I would suggest that exterior areas directly outside and adjacent to damaged buildings are going to be most common where you see some coverage limitations. And so I'm talking about outdoor fencing, outdoor furniture, outdoor signage, in some cases, the glass on a building. And so if what you're trying to do is trying to direct funds where there might be some limits in coverage, that would be my suggestion, is trying to help impacted businesses and property owners with the exterior areas directly adjacent to the damaged premises.
I would add that one of the areas that we might want to consider some community level support or for funding is to provide a backstop for employees that no longer have income, because in some instances, and especially with COVID, either the business interruption aspect of things is not specifically covered due to pandemic. So employees that are laid off or furloughed, if you will, the PPP stuff that we've had will take care of some of that, but they're not covered under insurance. Now, those types of coverages tend to go away in many instances from the research that we've done due to this crisis, because now the loss to the business triggers the ability for business interruption insurance. But because there is a limited amount of projected income based on the policies that we have for certain types of businesses, there's a gap in being able to take care of the folks that are employed by the businesses. So that would be an area that I would recommend that we take a look at funding, is being able to create bridges for employees until we can get back to a place where they're able to make a full income.
Thank you for that. That's great. Brian Hayes, do you have any comments on the insurance question? You know, the gaps, and I'm assuming that most policies have similarities because of certain, probably Department of Commerce regulations on what a minimum policy would contain, but there are differences too. So you can comment on that.
It depends on the policy and the carrier that it's been written by. If depending on the industry that the business is in, you might not have a standard market carrier. You might have to go to an excess and surplus lines carrier, and they have more restrictions in them. Department of Commerce isn't necessarily involved with monitoring their financial stability, but they might carry higher deductibles. They may not have business interruption coverage at all, or they may have very limited business interruption. And this conversation about not including payroll for certain employees might be a very real situation that businesses face, that they can't continue to pay those employees based on the coverage that they have because they bought a policy that they were forced to buy, and it didn't cover all of the exposures that they needed, and it was the most cost-effective policy at the time they were looking at all their exposures. So business interruption, deductibles, those are two really strong areas that we should be focused on.
Thanks. Tony Mendoza put a question up that he said that 40% of small businesses have who have been in business for more than a year have business liability insurance. That's a statistic that he had heard. Brian, do you have any idea about that?
Brian Hayes, yes. I would say that at least that many have business liability. If they're in contracts with other, depending on who they're working with, a lot of times they'll have contracts in place with vendors that they're working with that require them to have liability coverage and workers' compensation. But hopefully that at a very minimum that there's at least 40% that have liability coverage. Now,
So-
when it comes to vandalism, riot, civil commotion, liability is a very small aspect of it. And unless somebody gets hurt on their premises while cleaning up or afterwards, it's really not a liability exposure. The biggest exposure right now is in the property and business interruption issues.
Okay, thank you. So Caleb, getting back to the where funds can be directed sort of thing, you're the guy with the boots on the ground in the area, and Matt had some comments on that. What do you think?
Well, I do think that everything that has, a lot of what I was thinking about has been said in terms of loss of business interruption. And specifically, I think you guys said this, but to my knowledge, the carriers, when you're settling out that claim, would come back to what's been the last couple months. So the fact that if they haven't gotten up and running, or we're not an essential business, or we're planning on opening on Monday, which is really the sad part with some of these business, we're getting ready to go back to work, that's going to be taken into account when those claims are settled. And I echo what TJ said. I mean, most people, and I would just encourage every single person, nobody ever thought a riot or anything would happen to their business. Documentation is so key, because if now they're going back and it's all got to find receipts or memory or speculate, that's really difficult. So there's going to be some lacks of coverage in the policies. There's also going to be how do you know what really was missing or lost if there's lack of inventory, or if some of the small businesses just aren't that organized. It's going to be chaos trying to come up with a number, and unfortunately it tends to be underpaid if there's no proof. So just encouraging everybody to do that. So there could be those gaps in coverage that I would see. Outside of that, if it's intended for business, there could be some of the board up expenses might not be covered. Typically they are if it's part of mitigating damage. That's their responsibility as an owner to mitigate damage, and then they're reimbursed by the carrier. But that might become an issue as well. But that's really the two things that I can think of. But just wanted to give you a public service announcement. If you haven't before, documentation and photos are the best form of documentation to show evidence of property and structure. So that's what I would encourage.
Great, thank you. Chad, do we have another question or comment you want to tackle?
Yeah, sorry, just had to unmute myself. We've got a couple here. One is, what's the best way for minority or immigrant businesses or others who might not be as well connected get the help they need? Where do they go first beyond their insurance company, or if they don't have insurance?
That might be a question for our experts from the Department of Commerce to reply to first.
I can think of a couple of resources that they may want to try. The first is reaching out to people like Caleb, companies that have the ability to evaluate what's damaged and what needs to be repaired and how it needs to be repaired, to start getting a sense of what kind of amount and timeline is going to be required to reopen the business. The other thing that any individual business owner could consider is a public adjuster. A public adjuster is someone who has a background in insurance, someone that understands insurance losses, and there would be a fee that the insured would need to pay associated with that. But public adjusters do play an important role in helping people that might not have a deep understanding of insurance and the claims process evaluate what damage was done and what it will take to restart.
I think to go along with those aspects is looking at all of the different community-based resources that might be available. And, you know, to plug the chambers, this is a great place to start. They're a conduit to a lot of the different resources that are available to businesses at the community level. Local banks, regional banks that might have funds available for this. We can go to the Department of Employment and Economic Development, DEED. There's a lot of access to different types of resources that can be found through the DEED website. The Department of Labor and Industry also has a great deal of information on how to tap into different aspects of resource that are available to small business, and of course the Secretary of State's office. So those are just a few.
And certainly the city of St. Paul has been proactive too in getting information out to ways for people to get assistance during the COVID-19. Chad, do you have another question?
We got a couple other questions here from Peter Doley. Can you please address business interruption coverage and what kinds of information policyholders should gather to make sure they can receive the benefits of that coverage?
I can handle that. Each policy is going to be a little different with how they respond to what business interruption coverage is and how much monthly limitations there might potentially be. As far as information that they ask of, they're going to ask for financial statements, profit and loss balance sheets for at least 2 calendar years before the loss, if that's available. They're going to ask for payroll records, typically that you maintain by law, sales records for 2 years, copies of real property and equipment leases, major customer and vendor contracts, any significant contracts where you've got material to the performance of your business, records that allow you to establish the continuing expenses that you will incur and you'll have to bear while your operation is shut down or reduced. They're going to ask you for inventory records. They may also ask that you provide financial projections that you prepared prior to the loss, where you were prior to the loss and where you expected to be and how you can substantiate that. Again, they may, maybe they're going to ask for monthly sales projections and production summaries. They may ask for sales tax returns and for the business income piece. So those are some different things that you can expect to start to bundle as you start those conversations with your adjuster, and your adjuster will help walk you through the process.
Thank you. That was helpful. Chad, do we have another question?
Yeah, construction costs are high. Are there situations now where insurance proceeds do not cover the entire cost of the rebuilding?
And maybe that's another one for you to handle.
Can you say that one more time? What's not going to be covered? Is that?
Well, I think the question is, how expensive it is for new construction or rehabilitation, and are there situations where the proceeds of the insurance aren't going to cover the entire cost of rebuilding, and what happens then? And of course, that's
anytime you cannot get a contractor to do what the adjuster comes back to you with as far as an estimate of what they're comfortable with, then you've got a situation where you have to have the loss mitigated. I mean, you've got to go back, or an arbitrator, to get to a point where, okay, the insurance company says you should be able to rebuild this for X, and you can't get anybody to do it for that number. Then they have to prove to you that you can get somebody to do it, and that's where you have to get an attorney involved to defend your position. If you can't do it, then the insurance company has to come up with more money for you, and that's a situation that's real and we may very well see a number of those situations coming as this develops. But
and Brian,
hopefully those situations are rare. But yeah, go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah, if I could speak to it really quickly, I would recommend, if it's a total loss, that's a different situation. But if the building is recoverable, I would absolutely recommend a specialized restoration firm, whether it's our firm or any other firm. It's really, we specialize in doing this every day. We have methodologies that are different than a construction company in terms of the cleaning, and the adjusters and the carriers trust us. So there's a lot easier argument to say, hey, we have to do X, Y, and Z using these methods. And they say, yes, you're certified in this cleaning institute. We trust you guys, you're a nationwide company or you're a local company. And that can go a long way to getting recovered fast. I also want to give a quick, TJ, I agree with you. There's absolutely a place for public adjusters, but you also have to be careful in who you select as a public adjuster. If it's not a good alignment of trust with that person involved, that can also drag on claims years and years. And if you want to get back to business, speed is going to be important, as well as making sure that somebody is fully taken care of. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong with the Department of Commerce, but there's also an overage piece to most policies, up to a certain percentage, that if it's underinsured, there's some overage pieces to this. And I want to take a moment here too. One of the things that we are seeing and that I'm worried about more for the viability of the community and the business community, we've seen such an awesome investment in the last 10 or 15 years in these areas. New businesses, resurgence, the light rail. You know, we've had this awesome excitement for the Midway, and it's been growing. There is a growing number, what we're seeing already in Lake Street, and it might be happening in Midway, of a lot of businesses and owners of buildings that are just saying, you know what, I'm just going to cash out the total policy and I'm out of here. And that's a big concern that I have more than anything, is people leaving the community and leaving the investment and going, you know what, I'm done. I'm underinsured. I can't rebuild this. I'll take the big check and I'll deal with a lot and hold on to the lot, pay the taxes, and maybe sell it for a deal and just get out of here. So I don't know if you guys have experienced any of that, and I don't mean to go down a rabbit hole here, but I just wanted to mention that that's what I'm hearing from a lot of carriers is here's what's happening, because we're not seeing a lot of people calling us saying, come help us rebuild right now.
If I could piggyback on that, Caleb, you made some good points there. When there are underinsured situations, the insurance companies expect that their insureds will insure their buildings and property to replacement cost value. And if they are not insured to value, then they will only pay a portion of the claim. So if they expect you to insure something for $100,000 and you only have it insured for $75,000, if there's a partial loss, they'll only pay 75% of the claim. And you have to eat that additional 25% because you did not insure to the proper value of the contract. So that could be a gap in coverage. If someone's building is totaled and they determine that, hey, they don't want to rebuild, there's a good chance, even if they have a replacement cost policy, they'll only get paid on an actual cash value basis. So that actual cash value is the replacement cost less depreciation. And that might be enough for some building owners to say, let's tear it down and I'll hold the lot, like Caleb said, that they think they just don't want anymore. They're ready to hold on to the lot until it's the right time to sell it. The overage coverages are typically a guarantee replacement cost situation is more often with a homeowner situation than it is with a business situation. Most business policies don't have overages, but guaranteed replacement cost is a part of most, or many, I should say, homeowners policies. So just a couple other additional items. Caleb, you made good points with that.
Thank you. Sobering prospects. Chad, do you have any comments from participants or on your own about that?
So I'll just mention a couple of the comments here that we're seeing in the feed. Kate Mudge from Hamlin Midway Coalition says, in response to what Caleb had said, there has been little to no investment in Midway north of University. In other words, along Snelling there. Our concern is that businesses are at risk from predatory investors and developers, particularly from out of state, and that out of state landlords will just dump or tear down their buildings. Russ Peterson from Clever Architecture says, I agree with Caleb. I think the double emotional toll of our situation is so dramatic that getting to a creative solution or moving forward is almost beyond the vision of many people. We've been spending time guiding owners to solutions they hadn't even thought about. How do we help preserve and renew these businesses at the same time?
Thanks, Kate, for that comment. Go ahead.
So this is Kate. I'm not sure who's responding to that. It was really just more sharing my thoughts here on what we've already been experienced, particularly on North Snelling. That, you know, there has been sort of a lack of vision for what this very specific area of Midway could look like. Lots of talk about what a great, unique, diverse, vibrant neighborhood it is, and little to no planning even before all of this in terms of the vision that we have. So I appreciate Russ's comment too. He and I have talked about really getting ahead of this and developing a plan, a comprehensive plan that can be city blocks long to share back with the city, investors, developers, so we can create that vision and not have it created for us.
Thanks for that comment, Kate. For those of you who don't know, Kate's the executive director of the Hamlin Midway Coalition. So we've got neighbors and businesses, and if we're going to have any optimism, we have to realize that as a community, we have to get together and work together and do what we can do to improve our city.
One other thing I'll just note here is we have a group of volunteers literally going door to door to every single business in the Hamlin Midway neighborhood, including some businesses that would be in Union Park, talking to business owners, leaving cards. First of all, identifying which businesses are owned or operated by people of color and immigrants. This is not information that we've been able to get from the city very well. It's also very difficult to reach out to a lot of businesses right now that are closed, boarded up, or burned down to ask about what their needs are. So as we're moving ahead with the Midway United Fund, we're also planning on hosting what we hope to be a roundtable discussion in person and online conversations around assessing very specific needs, because we're going to be granting out dollars to small businesses. So that's what the work is happening right now. And excuse me. Again, if the city can't provide it through PED or DSI, then we decided that is of most importance just to get in front of the business owners who are impacted. And that impact, you know, isn't just on the looting and the burning and the rioting. It's that people are afraid now to come to Midway and support the businesses that are open. And so that's our first initial effort, and also compiling a list of incredible support from architects, insurers, construction firms, who are all willing to offer pro bono or discounted services. So we want to get a list of those resources in hand. And obviously there's lots of other groups doing that too, but one way of just starting to collect that information for folks.
Chad, you want to follow up?
Well, we've got a couple other questions here I think are good, and it'd be great to get to them. So I want to ask both of them. First one, many business interruption policies were not covering losses due to COVID. To the extent those policies were not covering COVID losses, do you expect they will cover losses from civil unrest, even if the business would have remained closed or greatly limited in business operations due to COVID?
We don't know yet how the insurance carriers are going to respond, because businesses were at a reduced sales in a lot of situations. The COVID situation was there was no trigger of coverage. Most policies have an exclusion in them for viruses such as COVID, bacteria exclusions. We don't know if the federal government's going to be asking insurance companies to participate and mandate that insurance companies participate in these losses. But we are recommending to our insureds that they do, in fact, turn in losses for business interruption in those situations, because if something happens or there's a change in perspective on expectations of carriers, we will want them to have turned in timely losses so that they're on record as having them. Now, if their losses or their sales are down and they go into a situation where they get shut down completely, they're absolutely going to pay a business interruption claim for the remaining expenses, but we don't know how they're going to react to and determine the actual value of those losses where they were prior to COVID. So it's going to be an interesting situation as these things unfold, but we don't know the answer to that yet.
Thank you, Brian. Chad, another question or two before we wrap up?
Yeah, from Tasha Christensen. What about the potential issue of the city requiring upgrades for old buildings and insurance companies not paying for those upgrades? How can businesses maneuver through that situation?
Try that one again. Ordinance and law coverage is part of, I won't say every policy, but it's part of most policies. And the ordinance and law coverage is designed to cover those additional expenses that a building owner incurs to upgrade to satisfy the city requirements. And that's part of why you have the ordinance and law coverage. It's designed to pick up those increases, that, whether you have to change the door handles on locks or you have to make it ADA approved, and if it hasn't been upgraded, they may have new regulations for code on electrical or plumbing, whatever. That's where the ordinance and law coverage of your property policy should pick that up.
So TJ, is that sort of coverage common in business policies from your perspective?
So I think if I heard Brian correctly, and I agree that when it comes to commercial policies, there is going to be usually some type of code compliance coverage. The issue becomes when a structure is significantly damaged. Sometimes, particularly the older that the building is, you may have more upgrade costs for code compliance than what the cap is in the policy for upgrading to code. And so it's a great question. It is something that I do think that businesses will face. It's something that our department sees a handful of times each year. In normal times, I think we'll see it more this year as businesses start to recover. But the kind of basic answer is most policies are going to have some type of coverage for code upgrade. The question becomes is that going to be sufficient for all of the code upgrades necessary to repair the building in its entirety to get the operations back going?
Great, thank you. Chad, another question?
Actually, TJ, a follow-up on that. Could you also comment on that question about pandemic versus civil unrest and the cause of the damage?
Of course. So Tony Mendoza has asked this question a couple of times in the list of questions. I appreciate it. This is the $1 million question, and I wish I could give clear answers, but I'm happy to talk a little bit about the thinking that's going to go into how this question is answered by insurance companies. I don't want people to come away thinking I, on behalf of the department, have said one thing and then it goes a different way. But here are the things that are going to be considered. Tony referenced the fact that most business owner policies have a virus exclusion for certain types of coverages, including loss of business income. And that applies also to any orders of a civil authority. So Tony is correct that for most policies, there was not business interruption coverage for businesses that shut down as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's something that is a major issue nationally. There is bills being proposed in the U.S. House and talked about in a variety of states to create some type of federal backstop like was done for terrorism coverage after the events of September 11. So I think we're going to see some potential government response to the issue of business interruption coverage not being available in most business owner policies as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So how do you then layer that with the fact that now we have some businesses who sustained direct property damage, and even if the orders of the civil authority of our governor were changed in such a way that allowed those businesses to restart, will there now be business interruption coverage? It's a great question. In my reading of the policies, I think that there is a good argument that if the business had plans in place to reopen on a certain date, and from the date they plan to reopen to the date that they are now able to reopen in repairing the damage that happened from the protests, that there would be business interruption coverage available, assuming certain factual things can be shown. But I do think that there are going to be some very tricky insurance coverage questions because of the layering. You have two different types of business interruption claims that may have been filed by a given business, one for the pandemic and now one for damage resulting from the protests.
Great. Thanks, TJ. We have a couple of comments from businesses that are offering services for people. Caleb Brunz, you mentioned that you offer 3D imaging, and Clever Architecture is also offering services for people. And we always have these funds that Chad was talking about to give us some reason to be optimistic and work together. Chad?
Yeah, like Brian said, there's a lot of funding opportunities out there. There's also a lot of volunteering opportunities out there. We've getting a lot of calls from people who are just wanting to know what they can do to help out. And so please keep those comments and questions coming. We're going to do everything we can to address them and to send you in directions of where you can help out. And we're going to try to do as much of that as we can as well. Like I mentioned, we are going to be asking people to donate food to the Midway YMCA next week and to also volunteer there. So please keep those coming. We're at 9 o'clock. I'm sorry we couldn't get to quite all the questions, but if you have anything additional, please do send them our way, and we'll see if we can reach out to our group here and maybe they can still answer them. Thanks everybody for attending. This is recorded, so we will send out the recording to everybody and you'll be able to see it later. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.